Work to keep Colorado's communities diverse comes as real estate prices continue to hit new highs. So how do you find a balance between growth and preserving history? Catherine Stroh with the Colorado Historical Society joins us live to talk about communities and what can be done to make sure that the past isn't lost as we work toward improving the present. Catherine, we've worked together before. Good morning. How are you doing?
Wonderful. Good to see you again, Micah. Thanks for having me here.
Good to see you as well. We've seen gentrification in some of Colorado's oldest neighborhoods. How do officials work to find that balance that's good for all stakeholders in the process?
Yeah, that is the million-dollar question, literally, as Denver and Colorado in particular continue to experience population growth and a lot of population movement. People are moving around right now. They're realizing that with this last year having to work from home, they have choices. As long as they've got the internet access, the technology they need, they can choose which community to land in. So it really becomes a question of what do you want that community to be? And I'd really encourage that curiosity, both from the people moving into those communities, as well as the investors looking to invest in those communities for tax reasons or whatever that might be, to take some time and learn the history of the people that have lived there before them and come to appreciate that. We have so many lovely historic buildings throughout Colorado, and it doesn't have to be an either or conversation. It doesn't have to be new development versus saving the buildings and the history that are already there. Historic preservation can be an economic development tool itself, both for the developer and for the communities. And that there are a lot of incentives out there right now to reuse old buildings, whether they're grants, low interest loans, tax credits for rehabilitating existing buildings, energy credits for making them more energy efficient. There's just tons of ways to use that existing building stock and breathe new life into it and still make it useful and appreciated by the people that live in those communities today.
Yeah, I want to elaborate a little bit on some of what you just said. Do you see those as solutions to making sure that low-income residents that find themselves in these neighborhoods that are being gentrified, do you see those as solutions as making sure they don't get forced out?
Yeah, that is a tricky conversation for sure. And historic preservation does not necessarily mean gentrification. It's important to understand that. We've looked at the data on that, and it's across the board, and that's a much larger conversation. But I'm working with some developers, for example, in Pueblo, who are turning an old hardware building built in the 1900s, and now they're rethinking this building as a place for affordable housing units upstairs, a food hall on the first floor. It can get people living very close to where their offices are. That's just one example, but we've seen a ton of examples in the Denver metro area as well, such as not the Ivy Wild School. Ivy Wild is down in Colorado Springs, but the Fruitdale School in Wheat Ridge, that's another prime example of turning an old building into affordable housing and keeping people connected with that history in their communities.
The Colorado Historical Society, always very hard at work. Can you tell us, maybe share with us some of your favorite historical landmarks that you all have been able to preserve?
Sure. And just a quick note, we're the Colorado Historical Foundation. We get mixed up with the Colorado Historical Society all the time, but they're a great partner of ours. Some of our favorite projects, I'd say a recent one would be Tom's Diner in Denver. We worked with Historic Denver and a developer who really values historic preservation and what it can bring to a community. They placed some restrictions on that building to ensure that it's going to maintain its very quirky, unusual architectural style that everyone's come to appreciate. It's a Googie style building. And they're working with the owner to develop it into a new restaurant concept that I think the community is really going to appreciate in the end. And they'll still get to enjoy the building that's been there for years and years.
Before I let you go, one last question. What's your biggest concern as Colorado grows, especially with redevelopment projects not seeming to be slowing down anytime soon?
I think it just needs to be that people take the time to really understand the context and the history of the communities where those developments are going in. You know, really get to know those. The most successful projects are going to be where the developer really gets to know the community and integrates that culture and history into any revitalization efforts. Those are going to be the win-win for everyone.
All right, Catherine Stroh with the Colorado Historical Foundation, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Micah. Good to be here.